So the 76ers are 6-5 at the moment. Perhaps a little disappointing, but at the same time not shocking, given that we know this Markelle Fultz thing is going to be a process, right? It's the next step in the process. They trusted one process, now they're trusting a new process. And I do want to spend most of this video talking about Fultz, but before we do that, I guess we can just say, like, losing Ilyasova, losing Bellinelli, definitely feeling the effects of that. Dario Saric is having a tough time right now where he doesn't totally know when to shoot, doesn't totally know when to go off the dribble. He also just can't make his outside jumpers, but we expect that to adjust itself as the year goes on. And, Joel Embiid's been awesome, but still, the offense has had a tough time. And the interesting thing is, basically, when Fultz is out there without Ben Simmons, he's actually pretty decent. He's able to be himself, and oftentimes Philly surrounds him with as many shooters as possible. So they'll have like Covington, Redick, Muscala, who's been quietly big for them. Is it Shamet? They're, I believe, a rookie, the 21-year-old shooter who looks really confident already in the NBA. Whenever those guys are out there with Fultz, the team's actually doing well because Fultz can actually, like, not run a million pick and rolls because Philly doesn't run that many pick and rolls. They've always been, like, towards the bottom since they've gotten Ben Simmons. But at least Fultz can, like, do that a little bit more. He can take the ball in transition. The spacing is pretty good, and there's not someone else to take the ball out of his hands, which then allows the defense to back up off of him like crazy. And, we can see Markelle Fultz be the guy that they drafted, right, outside of, like, pull-up jumpers and all that stuff. However, once Ben Simmons and Fultz are in there together, or if Fultz is in there with Amir Johnson or TJ McConnell, it's a disaster. It's minuses across the board with these lineups, and it makes sense as to why, right? I mean, at a certain point, you have not enough shooting out there and, spacing issues and the whole 9 yards. And it really is creating this awkward energy with this team that you can see when you watch them, where guys don't totally know what to do all the time. It seems like the only dude who is 100% comfortable in the offense is JJ Redick, because it seems like no matter who's playing, Brett Brown's always going to draw up something for Redick to just run around like a crazy person and get the ball. But outside of that, it's like I already mentioned Saric. For as good as Embiid has been this year, I think one thing that is a little telling is that he's taking about 5 threes a game, which is the most he's ever attempted, even though he hasn't been respectable from out there since his rookie season. Is that perhaps like a couple of extra frustration threes? I mean, maybe. There was 1 3 when I was watching the Nets game earlier where Embiid shot it like really early in the shot clock with a defender pretty close to him. It just seemed like a really dumb shot that I wouldn't expect even Embiid to take, even if he's occasionally a little reckless from out there. Now, of course, he's also having games where he dominates Andre Drummond and then some, so Joel's going to be fine, but still, it's the weird thing that you just see when you watch them right now. And if it wasn't for Muscala and Shamet saving this team a little bit with giving them some extra shooting outside of JJ and Covington, it could be looking even worse. Now, the big thing is, I think, try to give Fultz a few more minutes per game without Ben Simmons. I think that would be huge, because the one thing you're trying to do right now, I think, you're trying to get Fultz as close to what he was in college for you to draft him, right? Even if you expect the jumper is not going to be what it was this season, and who the hell knows if it's ever going to really come back, but even so, he can still go off the dribble, he can still beat guys off the bounce, he can finish at the rim, he's very athletic, he's got a crazy wingspan, which allows him to finish effectively and all that. So allow him to do that stuff, and then as the year goes on and as he's just getting more comfortable, try to seep in more of those Fultz with Ben Simmons minutes and see if you can make it work, and you're going to have to stick with it, and you're going to have to deal with some of the rough times when the spacing is just really bad, and you might have to get a little more creative with Ben Simmons cutting a few extra times, or Ben Simmons posting up. I know the defense could just double him through off of Fultz, but you give Fultz an open lane, maybe he could at least take 1 or 2 dribbles in there, and then his athleticism can allow him to get to the rim, whatever it may be. But I think that's probably the best route, is gradually have Ben and Fultz play a little bit more together, because just throwing them both out there together right now is not working at all for this team. I think once Wilson Chandler is consistently playing, that'll be nice, so then that way they could have 5 or 6 legit shooters on this team, as long as we assume that Dario Saric is going to start knocking down his outside jumpers. And then I think the flow of the team can just hopefully build up throughout the year. I do think it was kind of fair to expect this, because can we think of another time when there's just been such a weird adjustment for a team as there has been with this Markelle Fultz thing? Because typically it's like the big adjustment comes from a star player being added to the team, right? Whereas Fultz is, of course, who he is, but then his usage rate is still like the 4th highest on the team. So yeah, it's definitely going to be an adjustment period. Now, one great thing about this Philly team is their defense should be fine. You got Defensive Player of the Year candidate Embiid. The team is huge as hell with Ben and Covington, and Saric and Redick at least plays hard. And Fultz should end up being a pretty good defender as well, because his wingspan, mentioned already, is pretty insane. So yeah, they're going to have that to hold them over all season. And when you have a guy in Joel Embiid who, look, I think if he stays healthy, I think it's safe to say he could be a top 10 player at this point. I mean, 30 points, 12 rebounds, 3.5 assists, and a great defensive player. That's a hell of an all-around dude. He could just will them to some victories, Like, even if it gets even worse as the season goes along and we're like, oh crap, like Fultz and Simmons may not be ready even for the playoffs. Well, Embiid could get you to 50 wins or pretty close to it, just by being that damn good. Yeah, I think I'm done. Philly should be probably okay in the long run, but definitely a slow patch here.